The Resolute had been a proud ship, but in the end, pride didn't shield it from the swarm. Captain Elias Vance watched his bridge dissolve into chaos as the krill descended, an endless wave of obsidian-armored monstrosities clawing through bulkheads and flooding every corridor. The hum of their hive cannons split steel like cloth, and whole decks were consumed before the crew even had a chance to scream. He fought like hell. Pulse rifle until it overheated, sidearm until it clicked empty, combat knife until the blade bent from carving through chitin. He fought until the smell of burnt flesh and acid blood clung to him like a second skin. But the swarm was endless, and the humans were few. When the ship finally cracked apart under a barrage of living missiles, Elias should have died with it. Instead, he woke wrapped in resin, dragged through corridors that pulsed like veins inside a creature's body. The walls were alive, faintly glowing, leaking mucus that stank of ammonia. The air itself vibrated with a distant, collective heartbeat, the pulse of the hive. The krill hive ship's sovereign brood was unlike anything built by hands. It was grown. Its walls flexed as though breathing, and every chamber whispered with the sound of millions of insectoid feet. Elias had heard rumors of these ships, entire ecosystems, birthing pits and battle stations fused into one nightmare organism. Now he was inside one, and every step deeper felt like a descent into hell. Other prisoners had been taken. He saw them dragged into pits and never return. Screams echoed through tunnels before being abruptly silenced. None of them made eye contact with him. He understood why. The krill didn't take prisoners to ransom or question. They harvested. They studied. And eventually they fed. But he was kept alive, hauled deeper into the heart of the hive. His guards moved with mechanical rhythm, their claws clacking against resin floors, mandibles twitching as though eager to pierce his flesh. He expected death. Instead, he was delivered to a chamber that could only be described as a throne room. The ceiling arched like a cathedral, ribbed with organic pillars that glistened with wet resin. Bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly along the walls, illuminating a raised dais. And upon that dais sat the reason the galaxy trembled whenever the word krill was spoken, Queen Zythera. She was massive, twice the height of any human, her body armored in glossy black plates, streaked with emerald light. 4 wings shimmered faintly at her back, half translucent, catching the glow like fragments of stained glass. Her mandibles curled in a sneer as her amber eyes locked onto him. Every movement radiated power. Every breath sent tremors through the chamber. This was not just a monarch. She was a force of nature. The guard slammed Elias to his knees. Resin shackles tightened around his wrists and ankles, rooting him to the floor. He tasted blood, felt bruises blooming across his ribs, but he lifted his chin. He refused to bow. The queen's voice filled the chamber, low and layered, echoing both through the air and in his skull. "You are human." Her words dripped contempt. "Your kind scurries, multiplies, resists extermination longer than it should. You are a plague." Elias let out a short laugh, sharp enough to cut the silence. "Funny, we say the same about you," the guards hissed, claws raised to strike. Zythera stilled them with a single gesture. She tilted her head, mandibles twitching in what might have been amusement or hunger. "You dare speak so boldly in the jaws of death?" she asked. "I've seen death," Elias answered, voice steady. "Doesn't scare me anymore." That gave her pause. For centuries, enemies had quaked at her presence. Armies broke, commanders begged, heroes crumbled. Yet this broken, bloodied human sat there spitting defiance into her face. His words carried no bravado, just the steady certainty of someone who'd already accepted his fate and decided to waste no breath on fear. She rose from her throne, wings flaring slightly, and began to circle him. The ground trembled under her weight. "I should strip the flesh from your bones," she hissed. "I should let my swarm drink you until nothing remains but memory." "Then do it," Elias said. His smirk never faltered. "Or admit you're curious." The chamber fell silent. Guards shifted uneasily. No one, no species, spoke to the queen like that. Yet something in his words lodged in her mind like a thorn. Curious. Yes. Against all logic, she was. For the first time in countless years, Zythera hesitated. Her instincts screamed to kill him, to make an example of this insolent creature. But her mind, ancient and calculating, whispered otherwise. There was strength in him, a refusal to break, something the hive had never seen. Finally, she raised a claw. "Take him," she commanded. "He is mine now." As the guards dragged Elias back into the shadows, he caught her eyes one last time. For a fleeting moment, he saw something raw beneath the amber glow, something dangerous, something uncertain. He didn't know what game had just begun. But one thing was clear. He hadn't lost yet. The cell they dumped Elias in wasn't a cell at all. It was a living chamber, walls slick with resin that pulsed faintly, releasing humid air with each breath-like shudder. Chains weren't metal, but strands of hardened secretion fused to his wrists. Everything here was alien, alive, watching. He slept on nothing but ribbed bone that shifted under his weight, as if the hive itself wanted him uncomfortable. Days, or what passed for them without a sunrise, bled together in that place. Sometimes krill drones brought food, tasteless nutrient paste pressed into his mouth like feeding livestock. Sometimes they tested him, blades drawn, claws swiping close enough to spill blood. He didn't flinch. They wanted him to. That was the game. But the strangest part wasn't the drones. It was her. Queen Zythera returned often, as if unable to stop herself. She claimed she came to study him, but her questions were never about troop numbers or battle plans. She wanted to know why humans fought when they should run, why they laughed when surrounded by despair, why a soldier with no hope of survival still glared at her like he had the upper hand. "You cling to survival with absurd tenacity," she said once, pacing around him. "Even when the swarm eclipses your fleets, when your colonies are ash, you rise again. Is it stupidity, or is it instinct?" Elias smirked through split lips. "Call it habit. We don't do extinction very well." She didn't laugh, but her wings twitched with something dangerously close. For a moment, her monstrous face softened, not with mercy, but with thought. He had unsettled her, and she hated it. So the studies grew harsher. She forced him into combat trials, unarmed against her drones. Elias fought until his muscles screamed, breaking carapaces with sheer stubbornness. She tried mental contests, dragging him into psychic visions meant to shatter his sanity. He clawed his way out, every time sneering at her illusions. She even attempted humiliation, surrounding him with swarms that hissed, mocked, taunted. Elias stared straight at her instead, eyes daring her to try harder. The queen's frustration mounted, yet every test only deepened her fascination. He wasn't just resisting, he was thriving. The more she tried to crush him, the stronger he became in her presence. One cycle she arrived without guards. That alone sent ripples of tension through the hive. Queens were never without protection, never vulnerable. But she dismissed her brood, sealing the chamber until only she and Elias remained. "You are fragile," she told him, towering over his chained form. "Soft, weak. A single strike could end you." He leaned back against the living wall, grinning. "Soft? Try me." For a heartbeat, silence stretched. Then, with a hiss that trembled between fury and curiosity, she reached for him. What began as a test of dominance spiraled into something neither had intended. The hive itself seemed to hold its breath as queen and prisoner crossed a line older than the war. She wanted to break him. He refused to be broken. What resulted was not surrender, but collision, an impossible union born from defiance and hunger, and in that collision, something unprecedented happened. When the psychic hum of the hive quieted, when her wings stilled and her breathing slowed, the truth hit her like a spear through the chest. She was with child, on the very first attempt. For the krill, reproduction was sacred, ritualized, bound by instinct and centuries of genetic control. No outsider had ever touched it. No outsider had ever been allowed. Yet here she was, her perfect control shattered by a single human. The hive shrieked. Across the sovereign brood, drones faltered. Warriors dropped to their knees, generals bowed in stunned silence. The queen's psychic roar reverberated through every corridor, a mixture of fury, disbelief, and denial. Zithra's claws dug deep into the resin floor as she rounded on Elias, eyes blazing like suns. "You corrupted me!" she bellowed, the chamber trembling with her rage. Elias, bruised and bleeding, leaned forward on his chains. His smirk hadn't faded. Or maybe, Queen, I just improved the bloodline. For the first time in her reign, she struck him not out of command, but out of emotion. He slammed into the wall, resin cracking around him. Yet when he lifted his head, blood running from his temple, he was still smiling. That was worse than any wound. The Queen turned away, wings thrashing violently, her fury echoing across the hive. She should have killed him. She should have silenced this blasphemy before it poisoned her empire. But she couldn't, and the hive knew it. The sovereign brood shuddered with dissonance. The moment Zithra's body acknowledged the impossible, pregnancy seeded by human flesh, the hive mind fractured. Drones twitched uncertainly, generals whispered in psychic channels they had never dared open, and rival queens across the empire sensed weakness rippling through the cosmic web. For the Krill, the queen was not just ruler. She was divinity, the heart of the swarm. Her womb was sacred. To be tainted by an alien was blasphemy beyond measure. Yet the evidence pulsed inside her body, undeniable. Her fury exploded across the hive. Whole sections of drones tore themselves apart under the force of her psychic scream. Commanders collapsed, begging forgiveness. But fury couldn't silence doubt, and doubt was lethal. Rumors spread like wildfire. The queen had been compromised. Elias, still chained but grinning through split lips, became the whisper on every mandible. "The human!" they hissed. The human did this. To the Krill, he was a contamination. To the slaves and prisoners scattered across the hive, he became something else entirely, a symbol. While Zythera wrestled with rage, the humans struck. The United Fleet, long battered and retreating, suddenly smelled blood in the void. Intelligence reports, pieced together from intercepted psychic noise, confirmed the sovereign brood was unstable. Commanders argued, some believing it was a trap. But desperation breeds boldness, and Earth was desperate. Thus was born Operation Torchfall. From hidden shipyards and asteroid bases, humanity assembled everything still capable of flight. Old cruisers patched with scavenged plating, frigates running on half-dead reactors, even mining barges converted into missile platforms. The fleet surged through wormholes, its goal clear: strike at the hive while the queen reeled. When the United Fleet arrived, the void became fire. Krill vessels swarmed like hornets, sleek organic shapes spitting acid streams and plasma beams. Human destroyers answered with railgun slugs and missile barrages that turned swathes of black space into burning debris. Dozens of ships died in the first minutes, but this time the humans didn't scatter. They pressed forward, relentless, driven by the scent of their enemy's fear. Inside the hive, Elias was not idle. Guards dragged him from chamber to chamber, intending to break him under constant torment. But cracks were forming, not just in walls, but in loyalty. Some drones faltered when ordered to strike him. Others looked away from his eyes. The hive's song was no longer unified. Uncertainty bled into every note. Elias seized his chance. On one march between chambers, he lunged at a guard, wrenching the spear-like limb from its grasp. Resin shackles tore open under the weapon's jagged edge. He moved fast, brutal, years of combat training igniting in his blood. In seconds, 3 drones lay twitching in acid pools, and he was free. The corridors were a labyrinth of pulsing resin. But Elias had a map in his head. The one thing war had taught him: always memorize the enemy's nest. He slipped through shadows, scavenging weapons from the dead until he found something he hadn't expected: survivors. Dozens of humans, some barely clothed, scarred from experiments. And not just humans, alien captives too. Thin, four-eyed merchants, scaled warriors from distant moons, species Elias had only seen in old reports. All broken, all enslaved, but when they saw him standing free with a stolen blade, something sparked in their eyes. He didn't give a speech. He didn't need one. He just said, "Follow me if you want out." And they did. The ragtag mob moved like a fire through the hive, gathering numbers as they went. Every guard they killed armed another prisoner. Every chamber they raided freed more slaves. Word spread fast. The human captain had risen, and he was cutting a path through the sovereign brood itself. Back in the throne chamber, Zithra felt it all through her fractured link. The swarm's song trembled with Elias's defiance. Her claws carved furrows into her throne as she screamed into the psychic void, "Crush him, and him, tear his heart from his chest." But the hive didn't obey with its usual blind zeal. Some drones wavered. Some ignored her. And for the first time in her reign, her will was not absolute. As the United Fleet outside battered the Krill Armada inside their queen's own ship, Elias Vance had become more than a prisoner. He was the ember of rebellion, burning where no fire should ever have been, and he was heading straight for the heart of the brood. The sovereign brood quaked as if the hive itself were in labor. Outside, the United Fleet pressed deeper, guns blazing, carving burning scars into the organic hull. Inside, Elias Vance led a rebellion through corridors slick with resin and stinking of acid smoke. Every chamber was a battlefield now, captives turned soldiers clashing with drones that no longer fought as one. Elias moved at the point of the spear. His blade hacked through carapace, his stolen rifle thundered with every shot, and his voice kept the survivors moving when fear clawed at their throats. Behind him, a growing army surged, humans in ragged uniforms, alien gladiators wielding scavenged claws, even former hive slaves who had broken free of psychic chains. They fought not with formation, but with desperation, and desperation was contagious. Their destination was the heart chamber, the swollen organ at the hive's core. That chamber wasn't just where eggs pulsed in rivers of nutrient fluid. It was the hive's command nexus, the psychic heart that bound every drone to the queen's will. Destroy it, and the sovereign brood would collapse into chaos. The march there was brutal. Drones boiled out of walls, some hurling acid that melted bone in seconds, others lashing with scythe limbs that severed bodies in a single strike. The rebels fought in close quarters, corridors becoming charnel houses filled with burning resin and twitching limbs. Elias never slowed. Each kill drove him harder. Each survivor behind him pushed him forward. He remembered every face lost in the war, every crewmate who had screamed aboard the Resolute and used their ghosts as fuel. His body was battered, cut, burned, but his eyes burned brighter than the hive's glowing veins. Then the floor trembled, and silence fell. From the shadows ahead, a figure emerged. Not a drone, not a warrior, but the queen herself. Zithra. Her wings filled the corridor with shimmering menace. Her claws gleamed like obsidian swords, and her eyes blazed with volcanic fury. The rebels faltered, some dropping weapons outright. The sheer psychic weight of her presence pressed down on them like a crushing tide. Knees buckled, minds cracked. One alien warrior collapsed screaming, clutching his head until it burst, but Elias stood. He raised his rifle, voice steady. "No more running. No more hives. It ends here." Zithra's mandibles spread in a hiss that rattled the walls. "You dare challenge me, human? You who has already defiled my body, now you seek to destroy my brood?" He smirked, despite the sweat and blood dripping down his face. "Lady, I've been wrecking your plans since the first day of this war. Why stop now?" With a scream that cracked stone, she lunged. The battle that followed was not soldier versus queen. It was primal, furious, personal. Her claws slashed with the weight of centuries, each strike denting walls, each miss carving troughs into the floor. Elias darted, rolling beneath blows, firing point-blank until his rifle clicked empty, then drawing blades to strike where her armor was weakest. Acid sprayed, sizzling against his armor, burning flesh beneath. The rebels tried to help, but the queen's psychic roar threw them back, bodies crashing against walls. She wanted Elias alone. This was not war. It was duel. Elias fought like a man already dead, every strike thrown not for survival but for legacy. His knife plunged between plates, drawing shrieks that shook the hive. She countered with a psychic blast that sent him crashing through resin pillars, blood flooding his lungs. Yet he staggered up again, spitting crimson, raising his blade. "You're strong," he rasped. "But you bleed." That single truth hit harder than any weapon. For centuries, the queen had been untouchable, divine. Now ichor dripped from her chest. Now the myth was mortal. Rage consumed her. She pinned him against the wall, claws pressing against his throat. I should end you, human. Tear you apart and scatter your bones across the void. Elias's thumb hovered over a small, stolen detonator. His other hand pressed it against the resin floor beneath the spawn pools. He forced a bloody grin. End me, and your brood dies with me. Zithara froze. For all her fury, for all her power, she hesitated. The hive pulsed uncertainly around them, drones wavering, rebels rising to their feet again. The queen of the krill had never faced a choice like this, her pride against her future, her vengeance against her survival, and in that heartbeat of hesitation, Elias Vance had already won more than he ever thought possible. The chamber pulsed like a living furnace, every wall glowing with veins of molten amber. Rebels and drones circled the edges in stunned silence, watching as Elias Vance and Queen Zithara stood locked in a death grip. Her claws pressed against his throat. His thumb hovered over the detonator wired to explosives buried in the brood's egg pools. The tension snapped first in the soldiers behind them. A cry rang out and both sides surged together again. The chamber exploded into chaos, rifle fire, screeches, bodies slamming into resin walls. But the center of it all remained frozen. Elias daring the queen to gamble everything. Her eyes narrowed. You would destroy millions of unborn lives to spite me? Not spite, Elias rasped, blood dripping down his chin. Survival! With a guttural roar, she hurled him across the chamber. He slammed into an egg sac, cracking its membrane. A half-formed larva spilled out, shrieking before rebels cut it down. Elias rolled, coughing, clutching the detonator tight. Zithara swooped across the chamber, wings slicing through air like blades. He barely dodged, scrambling behind a pillar as her claws carved molten gashes through it. She wanted the device more than his life now, proof of how much it threatened her. The rebels rallied, forcing drones back with sheer ferocity. Sparks lit the chamber as plasma fire burned through resin. For every rebel that fell, 2 more surged forward. Their battle cries rose above the hive's shrieks. It was no longer a slaughter, it was an uprising. Elias staggered upright, shoulder torn, vision swimming. He glanced at the detonator, thumb trembling. He could end the hive right here, bury everyone inside, friend and foe alike. That was the human way, burn everything if it meant no retreat. But something inside whispered, not yet. Instead of pressing, he shouted, Fleet Command, this is Vance! I'm in the heart of the brood. If you got a shot, take it now. Static crackled in his ear. Then the strained voice of Admiral Kerrigan answered, Negative, you're inside blast radius. We'd be killing you with them. Do it anyway, Elias growled. I'm already dead. The queen heard him and shrieked with such force the walls quaked. She spread her wings wide, unleashing a psychic wave that hurled rebels to the floor. No human dares decide the fate of my brood. She charged. Elias sprinted to meet her, detonator clutched in one hand, blade in the other. They collided with a force that shook the chamber. His knife plunged into her abdomen even as her claws raked his chest. Pain blinded him, but he held on, refusing to release either weapon. Around them, the battle reached a fever pitch. Rebels tore drones apart with stolen claws. Alien allies screamed war songs as they drove spikes into their former masters. The hive's glow dimmed, the psychic network flickering under the queen's distraction. Outside, the United Fleet held on by threads. Hulls burned, ships broke apart, but their guns kept firing, pounding the brood ship with relentless fury. Every captain knew their lives meant little if Vance succeeded inside. The queen slammed Elias to the ground, claws piercing into his armor. You are nothing. A parasite that crawled into my bed of war. He coughed blood, smiling despite the agony. Funny thing about parasites. They're hard to kill. And then he did the unthinkable. He shoved the detonator into the wound he'd carved in her chest. The device wedged deep into pulsing flesh, blinking red. Her eyes widened in horror. No! Elias kicked free, rolling across the chamber, screaming to his comrades. Fall back! Now! The rebels surged toward the exits, dragging wounded, firing wildly to cover retreat. The Queen clawed at her chest, shrieking as the detonator sank deeper into her core, her own body becoming the trigger. Psychic waves lashed outward, drones convulsing and collapsing as her control unraveled. Elias staggered after the others, vision narrowing. He knew he wouldn't make it far. Acid dripped from his wounds. His chest burned with every breath. But he kept moving, step after step, refusing to fall while others depended on him. Behind him, Zithera's roar became something greater than sound. It was the sound of a dynasty ending. The hive walls pulsed violently, cracks splitting through organic structures. Lava-bright ichor sprayed as the brood began to implode from within. The detonator's red light became a blinding flare. The last thing Elias saw before the blast. Swallowed, the chamber was the Queen's eyes, furious, betrayed, and afraid for the first time in her reign. Then the sovereign brood began to die. The sovereign brood's death cry tore across the stars. From the outside, the gargantuan hive ship convulsed as cracks ripped through its organic hull, spraying molten ichor into space. Whole limbs of chitin shattered and drifted away, breaking the perfect symmetry of a terror that had ruled centuries. The United Fleet, bloodied and broken, seized the moment. Burned vessels with smoking scars rallied one last time. Frigates vented atmosphere as crews sealed wounds with makeshift barriers. Capital ships, down to half their batteries, angled themselves for a killing blow. Admiral Kerrigan's voice thundered over comms. All ships, focus fire on the core. Pour everything you've got into that monster. Dozens of beams lit up the void. Torpedoes streaked. Rail slugs hammered. The brood shuddered with each strike. Its return fire faltered, drones drifting lifeless, psychic command shredded. For the first time in living memory, the Queen's swarm did not answer the call. Inside, chaos reigned. Rebels clawed their way through collapsing passages as molten resin rained from the ceiling. The hive was eating itself alive, the Queen's link severed by the detonator now embedded in her chest. Caverns imploded. Walls buckled, floods of acidic ichor drowned everything. Elias Vance stumbled among the survivors. His body was broken, armor shredded, but his will refused to fail. Every step was agony, yet he hauled wounded soldiers, shoved others forward, barked orders through a voice raw with blood. They moved because he moved. The Queen was not dead yet. From the collapsing chamber behind, her scream echoed, shaking the hive like a hurricane. She dragged her body forward, half of it shredded, ichor spilling in rivers, wings torn. Her claws raked walls, propelling her closer, refusing to yield. She burst into the passage, towering, eyes burning with a fire that mocked death itself. The rebels froze. Elias alone turned. He was weaponless, the detonator gone, blade shattered. Yet he stepped forward, planting himself between her and the survivors. Her voice thundered into his skull. You think you've won? My brood will rise again. I will not end by a human's hand. Elias's reply was a whisper, but it carried. It already did. The hive's core detonated. A sun was born inside the brood ship. A shockwave ripped through passages, vaporizing resin, incinerating drones, collapsing chambers in a single sweep. Zithera shrieked as fire consumed her, body torn apart, mind splintering into void. Her psychic scream reached across the battlefield. Drones spasmed and fell silent. Fleets of brood ships scattered. Every soldier felt her death like thunder rolling through their bones. The rebels were hurled forward by the blast, shields shattering, armor melting. Elias felt himself lifted into searing light. For a heartbeat there was no pain, only warmth. He thought of Earth, its oceans, its skies, the simple faces of the friends he'd lost. Outside, the brood ship erupted. The explosion rivaled a supernova, blinding fleets across the system. Vast limbs of the hive disintegrated into ash. Molten rivers cooled into jagged debris. Where once had loomed the sovereign brood, there was now only a burning grave. The United Fleet, half its strength gone, watched in stunned silence. Then cheers roared across channels. The Queen is dead. The brood is gone! Admiral Kerrigan lowered her head, whispering, Vance, you did it? Then her voice hardened. All ships rescue operations. Find survivors before the debris eats them alive. Hours passed as wrecks drifted, fires died, and silence returned to the battlefield. Thousands of pods were retrieved, survivors hauled from broken tunnels of the hive's remains. Among them were rebels scarred and bloodied, carried out on stretchers, some laughing through tears, others weeping in silence. But Elias Vance was not among them. All they found was a scorched fragment of armor, fused with alien resin and a blade broken in two. To the fleet, it was enough. To the survivors, it was legend. Word spread like wildfire. A single human had brought down the Queen of the Krill. Songs were written before the blood dried. Army spoke his name with reverence. Worlds long enslaved raised banners of rebellion, emboldened by the knowledge that even the invincible could fall. Humanity had not just survived, it had carved its name into the stars. On the bridge of the flagship, Kerrigan stared at the burning wreckage and allowed herself a thin smile. "He gave us a future," she whispered. "Now it's ours to keep." In the quiet that followed, the galaxy shifted. For the first time in ages, the Krill swarm was silent. And in that silence, humanity stood taller, scarred but unbroken. Elias Vance was gone, but his defiance remained, a fire that would outlive empires.